Thank you for visiting this limited series. The infection was initially mild, my small town city council run, the toxic American pandemic response, and what both mean for the future of the country, written by Heather Christina Schmidt. You can view the entire series now on schmidttalks.com or subscribe to get it sent in parts to your email box weekly.
To say that I didn't have an agenda of any kind going into the city council run would be a lie. But then, everyone that runs for public office has, or at least should have, one. What are you being voted in for if not to do things? This was the first completely nonsensical turn the campaign took, when people accused me of having an agenda, as if this was a bad thing. She has an agenda became the local QAnon turn of phrase that was code for bad lady, we shouldn't vote for her. I'm not sure to what extent all of the pizza sex dungeon Democrats are spawn of Satan stuff has permeated the local QAnon folks, but with roughly 30% of the community involved, in some fashion inconsistent with the national participation rate, I imagine at least a few of them legitimately believed my agenda was to inject the community with the blood of aborted babies. Or something like that. My agenda was simple. I saw a city council that was doing absolutely nothing to support our community in an unprecedented time. Most notably, the pandemic had shuttered businesses, and infected and killed community members. And, frontline workers like nurses and lower-wage workers were approaching me and begging for help with their working conditions in our city. Our city council was largely silent on the matters, all of them. Except, of course, throwing pittance small business grants at local businesses which, in the end, took so long to get out. Many businesses that originally applied had closed by the time the couple $1,000 were distributed. This endeavor also cost taxpayers tens of thousands of dollars in general funds just to put together, not counting the money for the grants themselves. To say the pandemic response from the city council, and entire city, was a failure would be a gross understatement. And the problem is that, as of writing this, we just keep failing more. The average job in our city pays $15, $18 per hour, while the cost of living is $38 per hour for a two-bedroom apartment. My agenda in reality was in everyone's best interest. It was rooted in fiscal responsibility coupled with a focus on public health. I wanted our community to become a blue zone, one where every design and planning decision was made with health in mind. Blue zone planning is rooted in public health and policy facts, and results in an overall increased quality of life and longevity for everyone. This meant more biking, less sprawl, more housing options, reduced cost of living, and raising the standard of living and employment in the community. On the surface, our city looks somewhat affluent. Median housing price is around $750,000, but more than 90% of residents have to commute 15 minutes or more out of the city to be able to afford it. What we don't talk about is that just over 7% of people in the city live below the poverty line, some within a mile of my district, and its houses that start at $3 million. My support base was largely in, and just above, that 7%, not necessarily in the people I was asking for votes. Moreover, I wanted the city to stop bleeding money. My opponent and his colleagues' incompetence over the years have cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars in lawsuits, mistakes, excessive administrative fees for their friends, and bungled PR campaigns. Managing the pandemic and its recovery from a more holistic and proactive approach was what my campaign focused on, and creating a safety net for our healthcare and frontline workers, even the ones that only worked here. Fundamentally, I had zero plans to stay in office for the long term. I wanted to win the election, do my part to manage COVID on the most local level, make some other health, safety, organizational, and quality of life changes along the way, and, likely, stick to one term, and done. Because the city's elections are in districts, I was stuck in the most affluent district, while coming from, generally speaking, just your average middle class. To win my district, I would have only need 4,800 votes plus one, a feat I only was able to obtain 39% of, earning only 22% of all ballots cast. In the end, I failed to turn out votes that would have brought me closer to a win in the election. When you look at the votes I did end up gathering, they were largely centered not even in my own neighborhood, but in the single, lower-income neighborhood in the district, the only one with rentals accepting Section 8 housing vouchers, where the vast majority of people I spoke to were so busy risking their lives working multiple, low-wage, public-facing jobs, that many would not have even voted had it not been for the ability to vote by mail. A renter myself, though in the single-family homes more aligned with the median housing in the city at large, I still understood the struggles many in the community faced. These were the community members that needed someone who would actually take action. Being on the city council is a part-time job, for everyone that's on it. To me, I saw mismanagement and a lack of responding to the needs of the constituents by my opponent. My own experience in politics, political science, public policy, community organizing, and in public-facing jobs, especially healthcare, pharmacy, management, was, in my mind, exactly what the city needed to do better than we had since the pandemic hit. And to my credit, it was my ideas and experience, my agenda, that earned me more endorsements than any of our city's council candidates in recent years. Accordingly to my agenda, I sought endorsements from every organization that I believed shared my mission and improved health and quality of life. I didn't waste my time with anyone whose mission did not align with mine, not out for just every endorsement I could grab. I went for the ones that had value to me. The local chapter of the Planned Parenthood Action Fund were the first to announce their endorsement of my campaign, with the nurses union representing our city hospital coming closely after. While Planned Parenthood endorses many, if not most, women, in addition to many pro-choice men, I was the only candidate in a down-ballot election in my entire county to receive the endorsement of the nurses. At our only in-person debate, for a neighborhood of roughly 4,000 seniors, I asked my opponent why after 4 years of him being on the city council, and even longer on the board of the local healthcare district, the nurses, in the middle of a pandemic, chose to endorse me. He had no answer. As it turned out, nurses and healthcare workers in general made up the bulk of my support, endorsed, financed, and otherwise. Of the 280 individuals that endorsed the campaign by its completion, 67% were nurses, doctors, pharmacists, or other healthcare workers. Another 23% came from public safety, specifically the Neighborhood Watch group I founded in 2015. Likely a result of my background in public health and safety, and my strong position on COVID and worker safety, the Nurses Union's endorsement then led to the endorsement from the local Carpenters Council, the union that advocated for workplace safety. Shortly after them, the local chapter of Yes in My Backyard, YIMBY, housing advocacy group gave me the thumbs up. The final big group that aligned my mission closely was the Women's Council in my community, which resulted in a sizable influx in funds for the campaign. Of course, my last endorsement was the best. Our congresswoman endorsed my campaign in the final weeks before the election. And while people were noticeably stunned that I was able to garner the support, in my district it ended up alienating many voters who saw her as a liberal carpetbagger from Los Angeles. They weren't, at least entirely, wrong. In life and politics, endorsements of you as a person don't always turn into results at the end of the game. Some of my endorsements, especially the ones closely aligned with the Democratic Party, were controversial to otherwise centrist voters. And, in the end, my own priorities were not consistent with the voters in my district, and also unable to overcome the slander and smear that my opponent waged so effectively against me. A sleepy, suburban, affluent bedroom community, with the majority of voters working and living their social lives largely out of town, didn't particularly want change. They wanted another candidate that would sit on the council and simply pass through what was already passed through before. Keep quiet, don't do too much. My opponent had already exhibited for 4 years that he would do little enough to not cause a ruckus, and just enough to keep people happy. What came after my loss was the eventual worsening of the pandemic and health and safety of our community. Many of them continued to appear largely unaffected, to the detriment of the rest of the city.
Keep going to continue. The infection was initially mild, my small town city council run, the toxic American pandemic response, and what both mean for the future of the country, written by Heather Christina Schmidt, or come back next week for the next installation on schmidttalks.com. Thank you to our sponsors, and subscribers like you. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay aware.